I breathe slow and picture the desert at night. Wind combs the dunes, and a hush settles over chain-link fences. I once walked those perimeters, counting stars between posts, hearing radios sigh, watching helmets that never opened to the air. On late rounds, the cafeteria lights felt like warm moons. Trays slid without clatter. Gloved hands lifted food, but visors stayed sealed. I sipped coffee, pretending not to notice, letting the steam fog my memory before it floated away. The helmets reflected everything but themselves. Desert, fluorescence, my own tired eyes. I told myself it was protocol, nothing personal. Yet the reflection felt like a lake with no bottom, a surface holding a sky I could never touch. At lunch, I listened for laughter and heard airflow instead. A small tide, in and out, like seashells placed against the ear. The rhythm soothed me, turned forks to metronomes, and set the room drifting like a slow boat. Curiosity is a candle. It warms and it burns. Mine flickered whenever a visor passed, silver and unreadable. I rehearsed questions without speaking them, felt them soften on my tongue, and let them melt back into silence again. One evening, the wind carried a gentle hum from far hangars. Not mechanical, more like two notes braided together, a lullaby meant from metal and dust. I stood by the fence and let it curl around my heartbeat. The more I listened, the more the hum remembered me. It traced my outline, quieted my shoulders, and loosened the knot tucked behind my eyes. The bass seemed to exhale, and the night tucked me beneath its sleeve. I asked a simple thing. Why the helmets, even at lunch? My voice felt polite, wrapped in felt. The answer was a glance, mirrored, depthless, and then a nod toward the corridor where the hum pooled like moonlight. The corridor narrowed, and the lights lowered themselves as if the building wished to whisper. On the walls, my shadow thinned to smoke. I thought I heard waves again, but they were breaths, layered neatly like folded linens. At a small door, my badge simply did not work. A soft red blink, a polite refusal. Behind the door, the hum lifted, then turned its face away, and I felt the door's kindness. Not now, not yet. The next morning, my desk held an envelope and a calm conversation. Terms, signatures, a ride to the gate. No anger, only a careful hush, as if someone had put a finger to the wind, and the wind obeyed. Discharge papers read like a lullaby disguised as formality. Outside, sand shifted kindly around my boots. The hum stayed behind the fence, braiding itself into silence. I carried the envelope like a sleeping bird. 3 months later, I woke with the taste of rain and no memory of weather. Dates were tidied away, shelves cleared and labeled, early, later, unknown. Between them lay a soft emptiness, the comfort of a bed already warmed. I tried to inventory absence. A drawer that wouldn't open. A key that politely declined the lock. Inside the gap, I felt only calm, as if someone had removed a thorn I'd learned to grow around. Sleep came easier, like a tide returning. I followed the slow roll of breath, counting grains of air as if they were desert sand. The missing days waited without urgency, cool as stones in a shallow stream. When I closed my eyes, the helmets returned, gleaming without glare. Not threatening, more like lanterns keeping night from falling too fast. I felt watched over, like a traveler guided by silent beacons along a gentle shore. Sometimes a visor would tilt, not to hide, but to listen. I realized listening has a shape, rounded, patient, and reflective. It gathers what you cannot say and holds it until your breath learns a slower alphabet. Days arranged themselves in quiet rows. Coffee, walks, the long horizon. At dusk, I practiced a kind attention, letting each sound arrive and soften. A distant engine, a moth at the lamp, footsteps that decided to be wind. I returned to the fence as a guest of the night. The hum greeted me like an old song I never learned, but somehow remembered. It touched my ribs, spaced my breathing, and I felt the sky lean closer. On the other side, a figure stood so still, the stars settled on it. The mirrored face was a moon with a heartbeat. I nodded as one does to a lighthouse across patient water, and waited for nothing urgent. Sleep became a shoreline. Each night I placed my questions like shells along it, not for answers, but for tide. In the morning, the sand held smooth impressions where worry used to sit. A dream carried me down a corridor that remembered my footsteps. The door with the red light was now a window of dusk light. Through it, I saw not machines, but a room arranged for quiet listening. There were shapes in the room, sitting as if in meditation. The helmets were off in the dream, not revealing, only resting beside them, like bowls catching moonlight. Nothing monstrous, just faces the dream declined to detail. I woke before fear could choose a shape. It dissolved like chalk in water. Outside, the horizon wore a ribbon of lavender. The day arrived barefoot, careful not to wake whatever was healing behind my ribs. Memories don't vanish. They change weight. The missing months felt lighter than air, a buoyancy where heaviness had been. I discovered I could rest on that lightness, floating above old edges that once cut. On a quiet afternoon, a distant shimmer moved like heat, but cooler. It folded toward me and away, like a curtain breathed on by a patient ocean. I closed my eyes and let its rhythm count time for me. I practiced kindness with my heartbeat. In for 4 stars, out for 4 dunes. The hum arrived to keep tempo, neither command nor warning, simply a companionable tone that smoothed the edges of each exhale. Sleep taught me that some questions are doors that open inward. The helmets kept space, not secrets. Space for breath, for gentle tides to pass, for a stranger to feel less alone beneath a listening sky. Once, alarms had seemed necessary, like sharp fences around delicate thoughts. Now I noticed how silence can guard without teeth. The night posted quiet sentries, crickets, distant air, a star that refused to blink too fast. I walked a familiar path as the moon wrote a slow letter on the sand. Footprints filled softly, then vanished by their own consent. The base watched with half-closed eyes, content to let the world glide past. In a gentle dream, a visor lifted like dawn lifting fog. No spectacle, just a sense of cool air meeting older air. The feeling held me, a hand on a shoulder, saying nothing, but everything soft. When I woke, I understood a little. The helmets were rooms where minds could breathe, undisturbed by weather. Rooms that could carry listening from one horizon to another without spilling a drop of quiet. I returned again to the fence. This time, I did not look through. I looked with. The night obliged, and what seemed like boundary joined both sides, like a river agreeing to be mirror and road at once. Across the sand, figures stood with an ease I envied. The mirrored faces did not hide. They reflected a broader sky, lending me pieces of it until my chest felt roomy enough for weather to pass. I thought of the missing months and felt gratitude rise like steam from tea. Some stories are kinder when steeped off stage. The taste remains, warm and floral, even if you never see the kettle. A soft realization arrived. Curiosity can be gentle. It does not have to pry. It can rest nearby, hand over hand, like climbing into sleep. The hum approved, lowering itself to a tone I could wear. If there were faces, they were not for display, but for listening. I felt heard in a way that left no imprint, like a bird landing on water and lifting off without a ripple. only a brighter moon. My steps matched the desert's slow heartbeat. Sand accepted everything. Questions, answers, and the gentle weight of not choosing. Even the fence posts seemed less straight, as if the night had kindly rounded them to lullabies. A quiet image stayed with me. Hands lifting a helmet like a bowl, catching rain that never fell, but washed just the same. I carried that wash back to bed and lay down under it, clean and unafraid. The base was not a secret so much as a cradle for secrets, rocking them until they slept. I, too, learned to be cradled by what I did not need to know, and sleep came gently to meet me. One night, the hum braided with my breath so perfectly that time loosened. Minutes unhooked from the clock and drifted like small lanterns into the dark, where they became stars with no schedules to keep. I realized the guard, without a face, had never been a person alone. It was a way of being, a mask made of kindness, a mirror that returns your storm as rain you can sleep to. Somewhere beyond the hangars, a door I would never open continued its work without me. I felt relieved. Not every path is ours to walk. Some only need us to acknowledge their quiet and pass gently by. I placed my ear to the night and heard a promise made in small syllables. Rest, restore, return. The words lined up like footprints the tide chooses to keep, just long enough for a traveler to see them. When I lay down, the ceiling opened like a map of unhurried constellations. Each star offered one breath. I followed them across the room and back, a ferry that never rushed, landing me softly on the same shore. I understood at last. Memory had been tended, not taken. A gardener had pruned only what had overgrown the path to sleep. In place of thorns, a clear walkway gleamed under a moon that knew my name without speaking it. In the gentle order of night, even the fence became a string on an instrument. Wind plucked it, and the song said, "You are safe." You are smaller than worry. You are larger than fear. I sat on a low stone and let the ground keep me. Far off, helmets glowed like small moons grazing the horizon. They did not approach. They did not need to. Their silence traveled well. A breeze arrived with the smell of cold metal and warm sand. It carried a lullaby that knew every hinge on every door and promised none would creak tonight. I believed it, and the night believed me back. I set down the question that began all this, like a cup too hot to hold. When I lifted it again, it had cooled to reflection. I drank, and it tasted of starlight, softened by distance. The hum drew closer, as careful as a hand tucking in a blanket. It smoothed the corners of my room and persuaded the dark to become velvet. I let my eyes close slowly, like doors returned to balance. In another dream, the helmets floated like lanterns above still water. Beneath them, not faces, just a feeling of listening, as if the water itself were awake and content to hold the sky without spilling. I stopped measuring the gap in my memory and began measuring how gently sleep arrived. It turned out to be a better yardstick, marked not in inches, but in heartbeats that learned to take their time. The base at night felt less like a secret and more like a monastery for quiet technologies. Each engine bowed into silence, each signal folded neatly for morning. Even the stars seemed to speak in whispers. One evening, clouds like slow ships crossed overhead. Between them, an opening revealed a deep calm, a harbor for thoughts to anchor. I let mine drift in, tied them loosely, and promised to return at dawn. I learned to thank the unseen. Whatever listened, listened well. Whatever guarded, guarded softly. Whatever changed me, did so without announcement, the way night changes heat to rest and sand to pillows. Sometimes, in the careful hours, I felt a presence as faint as frost on glass. Touch it, and it vanishes. Accept it, and it sings. I chose acceptance and slept with a chorus at the edge of hearing. The guard, without a face, became a star with a mirror, always there, always reflecting enough light to cross the room. I realized that was all I had ever needed, a way to reach the pillow gently. On a quiet walk, I found a smooth stone shaped like a tear, but feeling like a seed. I pocketed it, not as a mystery, but as a reminder. Even emptiness can grow something restful. I no longer looked for faces. I looked for listening. The world obliged. In wind through grass. In distant engines lowering their voices. In moonlight that arrived without knocking and left the door ajar. The desert taught me a lullaby with only 2 notes. Arrive, soften. I practiced until the notes played themselves. Even my dreams learned the tune, and every door opened inward to a quiet room. If you stand still long enough, the night explains itself. It is a listening held together by breath and distance. Some wear helmets to honor that silence. Some learn to be helmets for one another. I think the missing months were spent learning tides of attention. Not erasure, but smoothing. Waves polishing glass until it reflects without glare. Now, even daylight feels like a well-behaved star. When I breathe now, I hear the distant hum as a companion, not a summons. It stays at the edge of things, like a lighthouse seen from bed, keeping time for the slow ship of sleep. I keep the envelope in a drawer, not as proof, but as a bookmark. It marks the page where the story turned from questions to quiet. Each night I return and read the margin. Rest here. Sometimes a breeze carries a silver scent that reminds me of corridors and softened alarms. I smile and let it pass, grateful to have been a guest of places that choose kindness over spectacle. If there was an encounter, it was mutual and merciful. I was seen without being undone. I was changed without being asked to perform. The proof is simple. Sleep arrived and stayed. I think of mirrored visors now as portable horizons. Carry one, and you carry the sky. I do not need the device. I have the practice. When night comes, I lift it from within and look outward. A quiet gratitude visits before dreams. For listening that asked nothing. For doors that stayed shut kindly. For a fence that learned to be a bridge. Gratitude is a good pillow. It shapes to the head. On the calmest nights, I hear the hum fade to a heartbeat. Then to the idea of a heartbeat. Then to rest. Somewhere, guardians keep their watch with mirrors and mercy. Here, I keep mine with breath. I once thought knowledge meant opening every door. Now I know it can mean opening the window and letting the night in. It sits on the sill, polite and companionable, until sleep asks it to sing. If you are listening, listen gently. Let questions rock. Let answers float. Somewhere beyond the hangars, a lullaby machines cannot play alone continues. And the sand remembers every step we do not take. I promise nothing to the night except attention. It returns the favor with rooms made of hush. In those rooms, even a guard without a face becomes a friend without demands. When morning comes, I do not chase it. I let it find me where I am, centered, unafraid, carrying a pocket-sized horizon polished by breath. The day accepts this offering and steps softly around it. If I return in body, it will be as a passerby. If I return in dreams, I am already inside. Either way, the night keeps my place, a seat at a table where silence is the warmest drink. I am no longer counting fences or stars. I am counting breaths that arrive paired with gentle departures. The ledger balances itself. The numbers glow in the dark and then become the dark peacefully. By now, even the question of faces feels like light on water. Interesting, then gone. What remains is the water, untroubled, carrying reflections to shore in unbroken lines. When the wind turns pages in the sand, I read what I need. Breathe, soften, stay. The rest of the book waits without impatience, and the night guards it the way kindness guards sleep. A final glance at the horizon shows nothing ending, only the next calm curve. I follow it with my eyes half closed, letting the world blur to comfort. The hum nods. The stars dim themselves kindly. Here, on the far side of questions, I rest. Whatever wore the helmet wears the night now, and the night fits. I drift the way dunes drift, patiently, beautifully, and always toward softer shapes. If I ever meet that mirrored gaze again, I will offer mine without urgency. Two horizons greeting, two quiet rooms opening their windows. Between them, a breeze that knows how to sing without words. Until then, I sleep. The world stands watch in its own good ways. A fence humming softly, a door blinking kindly, a sky that chooses to be generous. I let it be, and it lets me be. And if a question wakes, I cradle it. I tell it the story of a place that prized listening over spectacle, healing over certainty. By the end, the question sighs, becomes breath, and joins the tide.